Where he was from, and we'll talk about that. And Gaiutra Bahadur, whose book Coolie Woman looks at another odyssey, but this time belonging to her great-grandmother, who went from India to Guyana as indentured labor. So I thought I would start by asking each of you to talk a little bit about, when you started your search, what were the concrete clues that you had, that you knew, were the starting points of trying to unravel the backstory? Maybe you can go with Saroo?
Well, it sort of started, I had to sort of think diplomatically about the way that I searched. And initially I just thought, well, where did I land? And I landed in Calcutta. So, well, I didn't really know what I was looking for. All I had was photos in my memory. And they were just photos of sort of the landmarks of my hometown, and that's about all. But, and that was engraved in my memory from those got lost. And I never forgot about it, and so I had that to work with. And then the other thing about it too was I also worked with where I landed, which was in Calcutta, but I didn't know where exactly I was from. It was pronounce very well, articulate very well. And so I just sort of thought, really primitively, it's just simply, and it's like, well, this is where you started, and a place using perhaps train tracks, because you came on a train to Calcutta, and why don't you try that? You haven't got anything else. So that's really how I began, and for years and years, I started using Google Earth and just looking on train tracks, hopefully. And that took a very long time.
What were the landmarks that you remembered from them? Because how old were you approximately when you did get lost?
I'd say I was about 4.5, 5. It's just a guesstimate at the moment. No one really knows. But the things that I was sort of looking for was water towers, a specific sort of bridge that sort of goes over the train tracks, a river, and sort of roads and paths that sort of the way that I remembered, which is sort of was engraved in my memory. I sort of had this town that I used to walk and for days and days, sort of different ways, and took different nooks and crannies. And I flipped the whole town upside down, so I'm looking at a bird's eye view, and it's like, well, if you were to place me anywhere in that town, I'd know how to get back to my house from anywhere within that sort of vicinity, wherever you place me. So yeah, there's quite a few things.
Yeah, but I mean, of course you can understand, you're looking in a country the size of India for basically a water tower, a railway bridge, a town which has a name something like Brahmapur, something like that, which is about, exists about every 50 miles. There's a town with similar name like that, and train tracks. So this is what you have to sort of pinpoint where you came from years later. And Gaiutra, you were looking way further back in time. So what specific things did you know about your great-grandmother when you started this odyssey?
Right. So it's actually a story of several journeys. The journey of my great-grandmother who left Calcutta in 1903 for British Guyana, and she was 4 months pregnant and traveling by herself. But it's also sort of my own journey to figure out sort of who I was and where I belonged. I was born in Guyana, and my family immigrated to the US when I was 6, to a small working class city on the outskirts of Manhattan, Jersey City. I know that some Indians have heard of it because in the 80s there was a group called the Dot Busters active, which was targeting Indians. And here we were, an Indian-looking family, and we were similarly targeted. And someone wrote "Hindus go home" on the side of our house, for instance. So growing up, I always had sort of questions about how Indian was I? Am I Indian? And when I started asking my father about our links to India, he told me about my great-grandmother because she was the closest link. And my father is a great record keeper. He has all of the papers for every single member of the family. And he had his own father's will, which said that he was born on a ship called the Clyde in 1903. And I sort of used that will to work backwards. And I went to Guyana and did work in the archives. I looked at all of the ship records for 1903. And I mean, the British were excellent record keepers. So I was able to find my great-grandmother's immigration pass, which told me her caste, how old she was, you know, remarkable strokes of intimacy, like she had a burn mark on her left leg, and written in pencil on the top was pregnant 4 months. And it also had the coordinates for her village, which sounds a great deal like your village name, actually, Burahapur. So I knew the name of the village, the Tanna, that it was in Chapra in Bihar. And I also, you know, played around with Google Maps. I wasn't able to find the village because I think the British spelling was not quite right, but I was able to find the police district, the Tanna, and sort of work out from there. And I was just going to a friend's wedding in Assam a couple of years ago, and I figured, you know, I'm in the general neighborhood, why don't I just hire some guides and translators and see if I can find the village, and it worked. It was amazing.
So we'll talk about what each of them found eventually there. But this must be a little surreal for you to sit in the shadow of Queen Victoria talking about indentured labor during the...
I mean, Calcutta in particular has a place in the imagination of Indo-Caribbeans and Indians who are part of the history of indenture because it's the port of departure, the point of departure. And it was also the point of return for about a quarter of indentured laborers. They did return to India and try to find their way back to their villages. It was hard for them too. I mean, many of them were not accepted back into their families because of the idea that if you crossed the dark waters, you would lose caste. So they ended up in Calcutta and Maitre Bruce, in slums along the riverside, sort of just waiting for ships to take them back again to Guyana or Trinidad or wherever.
And within your family, had any stories come down about, you know, how unusual it was that your great-grandmother embarked on this journey on her own, 4 months pregnant?
No stories. No one talked about it, at least not in front of me. And maybe it was something the adults talked about amongst themselves, but I did not know this incredible story until I asked my father, you know, how are we connected to India? And he told me, you know, his grandmother was the closest link. And his exact words were, she was a pregnant woman traveling alone. And I was like, whoa, why hasn't anyone ever told me about this before?
And when you looked at the records, how unusual did you find it in terms of single women who went on their own?
So she was a very representative figure, actually. About 75% of the women who migrated were traveling without a husband. And that's sort of when I realized that I had a book to write. It wasn't just about my great-grandmother, but about generations of women, you know, 250,000 women, really. And they were the first Indian women overseas in significant numbers.
And Saroo, in terms of when you started, well, when you ended up in Australia eventually and were adopted, and when did you seriously start trying to find the way back, as it were?
Well, I actually really started when I was around 16, 15, roughly around that kind of age. It was just a thought at the time. It was, you know, there's me in Australia, and I've got this other past to me, which a lot of people don't really understand, and I didn't really talk to a lot of people about it, thinking that, you know, I don't think they'd really understand it or believe me in that case. So it all sort of started when I had a map in my bedroom, and Mum put a map of India in my bedroom, never to forget where you're from. And, you know, at some stages and phases of my life whilst growing up, I always used to look at it and think, you know, I'm from somewhere, you know, on this map. But, you know, I used to close my eyes and just go, ding, you're there. No. that's not the place. And you know, just having that map sort of kept the memories alive and kept my background and who I am and to be ongoing and never forget. So, you know, it started sort of in the sort of slower echelon of which progressed onto going onto Google Earth, which then became almost an obsession of trying to find my hometown. It was almost like a feeling that you're getting close, you're getting hotter, oh no, you're getting a bit colder. But, you know, it was that sort of ambitious determination that really got me where I am now. And I think, you know, a lot to do with sort of the love between and the bond between mother and son. So that I never left hope there.
And this is, I know this session is sponsored by Google, and this is not a sponsored paid media question, but would any of this have, and I know Parma's right there, but would this, I mean, would this have been possible at all without something like Google Earth? And how good was it with, you know, in terms of mapping? Like, how painfully slow was it to try and map these villages as you were trying to construct these circles on train journeys out of Calcutta?
Look, initially without Google Earth, I don't think it'd be possible at all. I'm trying to find what's a visual in my memories and sort of marry the two up on what's on the screen. And if I went to India and thought, well, a lot of people were saying your facial features, we think you're from sort of this area of India. And, you know, I wouldn't have known any better. And I would have gone there and thought, well, I'm trying to find Berhampur, where that's the train station where I got on the plane, on the train late at night and ended up in Calcutta. But I would have sort of walked away in dismay because, you know, this is not the train station as I remembered it 26 years ago. And so using Google Earth has, you know, really helped. I mean, it was the only thing, and I had to wait for it too. I mean, when I was young, around 15, 16, Google Earth wasn't around. And when I did use Google Earth, it was sort of quite slow, the refresh rate when you were zooming in from high above. But as time progressed and speed of the internet got faster, then the refresh rate was a lot quicker, and I was able to sort of go past towns on, you know, using the railway train lines as sort of a guide, and sort of zoom in, quick zoom out, and sort of progressing from there, I decided not to zoom in anymore. I had to sort of find this hometown where it looked sort of the exact kind of map in my memory. So I was almost like going fast, speed like Superman almost, and that's what I was doing as I sort of, you know, came into from 2007, 2008 to 2011.
What did you do the moment when you actually found something and you kind of recognized it after weeks, months and months, years of, you know, trying to, you know, being on a wild goose? I mean, you are literally looking for a needle in a haystack.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And you know, I thought it is a needle in a haystack, but one day I'm going to find it. And, you know, I did sort of dot the I's and cross the T's and started using a bit of mathematics and try to remember things about the weather and what sort of cultural events that used to occur. But it took a bit of time, but I just you know, kept on going, and surely enough, if you keep on going, you're bound to find it, regardless how hard it is. It's there, but one day, not today, not tomorrow, but you'll find it. And when I did find it, it was late at night, and you know, my girlfriend, she was in bed. She said, "Oh, look, come home, like go to sleep, Saroo." And I was always nodding off all the time. I was like looking on Google Earth and going almost to sleep. And she'd sometimes, like, I'd wake up and she's there. So what are you doing? and when I did find it, it was about 1:30, 2 o'clock, and I zoomed in at this little sort of a railway station that I thought, you know, the first thing I've got to see is a water tower which is next to the railway station. And so I zoomed in more, and there it was. And then I've got to say, well, there's got to be a train station right next to that water tower, and there it was there. And then I decided to, and I was really questioning myself as in, you know, you gotta meet everything that's in your memories as to what you're seeing, and so that's what I was doing, and everything aligned perfectly, just like as if the planets had aligned for me that night. And when that happened, it was like, this has got to be the place. It was like I was in almost euphoria, but also sort of skeptical about it too, because you know what you're looking at is not reality. And so I thought, well, I've got to find out a bit more. What's the name of the place? It's called Burrampore, not Burrampore, the way that I used to say it. I was only little. I didn't know how to articulate words very well. I didn't know how to speak very well. And I only knew about 5 to 10 words. Hence, why I ended up in Calcutta and didn't know how to talk to people of getting myself back home. So from then on, I found out it was called Burrampore, and the way that I sort of spelt it, and I told my adoptive mother the way I spelled it, was totally wrong. And so that's how it all began. This is the town. Let's sort of consolidate it more, and let's try and find something on Facebook, and then also go on to YouTube. So I've got the visual, which is on video, as well as the visual, which is on Google Earth, and also sort of confirmation, which is on Facebook. 1, 2, 3. How can you get any better than that?
It's
amazing.
No, your insomniac nights are totally striking a chord. My book relies on a lot of sort of old-fashioned work in the archives, spending slow time looking at ship reports for 77 indenture voyages, but I also relied on technology a great deal and would stay up late at night Googling the names of people I found in the records who were interesting. For instance, there was one ship surgeon whose name was T.D. Atkins, and he ended up marrying an indentured woman he met on the ship. She was his patient, and buying off her indenture contract and apparently sailing away with her to England. So I wanted to know more about T.D. Atkins and was just Googling away, Google Books, familysearch.org, Ancestry.com, all of those methods, and was able to piece together, sort of 4 or 5 very compelling paragraphs about this couple. And T.D. Atkins, I found out, was born here in Calcutta, in Fort William, and died here and was buried in Fort William. All of this because of...
But the indentured...
but the indentured woman, again, like a ghostly presence always. I had to just sort of speculate. So he married her, and the records say they went off to England, but the next hit I have for him is in Australia, where he's working as a doctor. But where is she? Is she with him? Did she return to Calcutta with him? Was she at the funeral?
And when you went to the village where you thought your great-grandmother might have left from, I want to know what your feelings were, because in Saroo's case, he knows when he's trying to find this place that this is a place where I used to belong, where hopefully I still have family that loved me and didn't know where I disappeared to when I got lost. In your case, was it more conflicted because you didn't know the reasons why your great-grandmother might have left, and what these people, if anybody even remembered that, would think about it and about you coming back?
Right. I mean, conflicted is the perfect word. It was emotional for me. Again, as I said, I grew up in the United States, in a city that was, in some cases, hostile to immigrants, and identity was always a big issue for me, and India had taken on sort of these mythic proportions. So here I was, finally, sort of at the point that connected me to India, and I was standing in the village where she was supposedly from. So, I mean, literally, I was shaking. I was, on the verge of you. My family is 4 to 6 generations removed from this place. And I went back a second time, 2 years later, when I knew that I was going to be doing this book that was not just about my great-grandmother, but this broader public history of women and indenture. And they were suspicious. They wanted to know why I kept coming back, and why I was going to the land office. They thought maybe I wanted to make some claim to their property. So the sort of a doubt was from both directions. They doubted me. I sort of wasn't sure they were actually the right family.
And were you nervous, Saroo, when you were heading towards what might have been your family, as to how they would react, and the imbalance that is necessarily set up when you come from a place like Australia to a family that is, economically much worse off?
Well, I just sort of thought, I didn't really know what to expect when I got there. First, initially, I was wanted to find the town that I saw on Google Earth, and I was just happy enough to sort of, see that, take my shoes off, and sort of walk the streets and the roads that I used to, not